Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show. This week we are looking at 3 core money-making moves. These are big moves. They're moves anyone can make, and they're important ones to make right now. Make sure you take plenty of notes. Most importantly, take plenty of action. Look forward to seeing you in the show. Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show with me, your host, Andrew Baxter, and as always, my offsider, Mitchell Laurential.
Thank you for having me on the show, Mr. Baxter. Looking spectacular, as always, clearly making some good moves in the wardrobe as well as the stock market. Importantly, though, as my segues get worse and worse every week somehow.
I'm looking forward to the Christmas break. I don't know if I can handle too many of these segues.
Tell me about it.
I'm segued out.
And we'll probably still be on Zoom every day. But anyway, parking that to the side. Our 3 best money moves today is what I want to chat about.
Was that one that was sent in by a listener, just out of interest?
I think it was, from memory. The production team briefed me this morning. I think it was a listener, one of our long-timers sent that in.
And that's a good note for everybody out there. If you want to see us cover anything, flick it through. And this is going to be interesting because, I mean, narrowing it down to 3 is pretty hard.
We're probably going to overlap in a lot of instances, but let's try and keep them different. So effectively our viewers will get 6 of the best money moves that we've ever made. I suspect they will be because, I mean, they're the foundations of success. So first one for me, definitely budgeting. Don't we love it?
Yeah, it's my dad, for those people that haven't listened, I did an interview with my dad a little while ago, you know, the view of the world through an octogenarian's lens. And you know, he had a tough life and installed into me some, both of my parents did some really important lessons, budgeting, you know, not spending more than you have, you know, save your money for a rainy day, you know, don't gear up too much and borrow, all of those sorts of things. And I guess from a really early age, and I remember actually, you know, the schools used to do the banks used to come around the schools, and you used to get your money box and put all your coin in on a Commonwealth Bank. Do that, and back in my time it was Midland, which is now part of HSBC. Came around and did their Griffin Saver program, and I remember now. I mean, this is going back, you know, more than 10 years, obviously, and yeah, it's this notion of saving, and not just saving. I guess we'll get into some other things around this, but once you've got it saved, what are you then going to do with it? Whereas if you don't save, if you're in a position where you spend, look, it's finance 101, Mitch, but if you spend more than what you own, you're never getting any surplus to invest or do anything with. So, you know, absolutely crucial. So must have savings, and more importantly, then the next step is what to then do with those savings.
Can I stop you there? Yeah. Just to jump in. For our viewers, what age did you really start budgeting, and how did you actually do it?
So my first paid job. My parents never gave me pocket money. I mean, money give me pocket money. I do, and I'm of the same view with my kids, and I do have money. I think pocket money is child welfare. If someone's going to do something in exchange for it, that's a different matter. And I'm not talking about slave labor, but I'm talking about an exchange of effort for reward, as opposed to just the put your hand out and get stuff. So I'd do stuff around the house. Yeah, I'd help out clean windows. Like my dad and I used to fix cars, or my dad used to fix cars, and I'd help him in the garage at the weekend. He'd weld, and I'd help him do that. So, you know, he used to pay me £5 for a Saturday helping him out in the garage, which, you know, £5 when you're, you know, 12, 13 years old is you know, decent money. So my first job was on a farm, bit of labouring on a Saturday morning, and then I moved into working in the village bakery, £1 an hour, and I used to work after school and at weekends there. So, really from that formal intro, prior to that, working in the garage with my dad, so probably 12, 13, I would say, and I always saved. He'd always say, save your money, son. And I had a bank account where I could save it, and you could watch the interest growing, and he said, look at that, you see that money's working for you, not like me working in the garage, busting my nut.
And it's funny how many Australians, or how many people at large, really forget about having a budget. Yeah. Pay comes in every week, and there's usually nothing left at the end of it, but you have to split it up.
And it's not just, the lesson from that too. I mean, you know, I can't spend what I have. I'm not saying that to brag. I don't need to budget, but I still do. I don't have a fixed budget. I can only
spend
budget
now.
I don't spend what I earn.
Yeah, that would be some fun. That would have some fun.
I'll leave that to other members of my family. But at the same time, you know, we go back and we've talked about different things. Do you need it or do you want it? But that notion of, it's not about the fun police either. It's such a fundamental skill set to have, because we're talking about budgeting in the personal context. If I look at it from a business perspective, and, you know, and I've run my own businesses of quite some size for a long time now. Not once, and I'm so proud to say this, not once since the day that we opened the door have we had a negative month in terms of bottom line. And it's because we do watch the bottom line. And and it's not about being miserly and penny pinching. We've all got great tech. We've got everything that we need. We've got a great working environment, and we do lots of fun stuff. But nonetheless, you have to watch that bottom line, because if you don't, it can blow the water really quickly. And I think that's why 70-80% of businesses go bust in the first year, because they've got no concept of managing the bottom line. And if you look at most people, neither have they.
Ultimately, what it boils down to as well is just the values that shine through this, because budgeting and really truly appreciating money for what it is and the work you've put in to be able to save and then invest only comes with good values around it.
100%. All right, what about yourself?
The best money move I ever made was probably first and foremost actually having some goals. Any road will take you nowhere, as a famous man once said. So for me, when I started full time here in particular, it's funny, I actually the other day, I have all my money and investing journals in my office, and I go back to the ones I was using 4 or 5 years ago, and I look at some of the money goals that I had back then to now.
How many ticks have you got?
Pretty much all of them, about 70-80% of them are ticked. And it's funny because the goals are pretty much the exact same. It's just the amounts that have changed over the time frames. And I think when I first worked here full time and really got into things, knowing what I was working towards, which for me back then was an investment property, which I thankfully have now, and I'm looking at a second one actually, believe it or not, to actually say, okay, what do I need to do to get there? Which by default meant that being a Virgo, I was able just to follow that plan to the letter and get there.
I remember, plenty of conversations we had when you're talking about, your first property transaction and, multi-dwelling, whether it's this, whether it's that, and you played it perfectly, and it's hats off to you, because, it's not easy for anybody to get started in the property market at any age, and the fact that you've been able to do it at a pretty young age isn't by accident. It's been very much by design, and that journaling process that we use to have that clarity as to what you want is crucial, because most people don't have what they want in life because they actually haven't sat down and worked out, well, what is it?
Totally. And one thing I'd also say out there to any listeners who may be in the same position as me, where they're young and fresh and are really hungry for goals, is even though you might be hitting your goals, don't have any lifestyle inflation with that. If you can keep your lifestyle the same and you can keep hitting goals, you will forever find yourself in front.
It's so true. I remember my dad saying, it doesn't matter how much you earn, you'll always find a way of spending it. And if you think about something, as innocuous as socks or something like that, and you go from your 10 pack for $5 at Big W, you can't get anything for $5, I suppose, but you know what I mean. And then it just goes the next, and then it's brand, and then it's another brand, and then it's another brand, and on it goes until you're spending $100 on a pair of socks, which is just ridiculous. But that's your lifestyle spend going up. Maybe the choice of wine or the cut of meat or where you go, or you go to the movies, you go gold class, all those things can creep up. So well done for keeping clear on what you want. And I don't think that'll just be a second property, that'll be the start of your empire. Absolutely.
Let's hope so. What's your second one for you?
Well, talking of property, for me, I think absolutely was my first property in London. And the reason I think that was so important to me is I was making good money, and it's a question of putting it where you can. But then making good money in London and buying a property, you're still very limited on affordability, especially when I was around your age, and I think for me that was really important. And the process I went through for it, I have my background from my parents of buy what you can afford, which I did. I bought in a suburb which wouldn't be necessarily somewhere I'd choose to live, certainly not now. But at the time was what I could afford. I'm not going to say comfortably because it was a stretch, but nonetheless I could afford it with some budgeting and whatnot. And I built into there. I always overpaid my mortgage. I always kept ahead of it if I could, because it's effectively an offset savings account, for want of a better description. Sure. And that particular property really was fantastic because I bought in an area just before it popped, and it was, I'm not going to say it was by design, there was an element of good fortune in there, but and it was great, and it served me really well when I was working in the city, because I could walk to work from where I was.
Perfect.
Which, given the number of tube strikes and so on that plagued London, and certainly at that particular time, my colleagues are taking an hour and a half, 2 hours, and cranky getting to work. It's a 15-minute walk. Fantastic.
And I guess the message there is get invested, because you can't save your way to wealth. You've got to invest. You've
got to have a real asset that's growing. That suburb popped, and I would have pulled probably about 400% out of that over about a fairly short period of time, like over about a 6-year period.
which you then parlayed into other investments, and there was your start.
Exactly right. And that was really critical. And I look at a lot of my colleagues and friends at the time. They elected to, and they were earning great money too. And their lifestyle bill, trust me, was brutal. And they rented because they wanted to live in a certain place, and that's great. But if you're not in the ownership space, and this goes to today, because so many people are stuck on that rental platform, which is really, really hard to get off. And then it's the affordability of getting in. You just got to bite the bullet as early as you possibly can to get started. It's never a bad time to start, as long as it was yesterday or the day before.
Oh, yesterday you said tomorrow, just do it. Famous Nike quote.
Love it.
Good stuff.
What about yourself? Number 2, what do you got for me?
Ooh, number 2. I reckon a big one for me, AB, was, I guess, when I started to combine my performance of my investments being in the share market, property market, and then as well as, my employment income being structured, actually makes a very, very big difference. And I know you gave this advice to me very early on: get yourself set up properly, because being able to run expenses through that, how you're structured and whatnot, can make a very big difference on the bottom line.
Well, we are in a high tax country. It's going to be a higher tax country too, based on the budget, I would imagine. And it's so true. And oftentimes, we meet a lot of clients that when you get the money, then you're going to get structured. The challenge, particularly if you've done a property, is if you start to change the ownership structure of that, there's a level of stamp duty that you've got to pay. So it becomes very, very expensive to unpack it and reset it up, I guess, in the most effective asset protection, tax efficient, that's gonna really work for you. So dig the well before you need the water. Put the horse in front of the cart, and every other cliche that goes with it. But spending some time working on the end game as structuring is huge. And I always remember, and we talked about this a while ago, the lessons from the green room, talking with Mark Boris of all people, and his whole philosophy, business-wise and everything, is work on your exit strategy before you get in. You got to know what you're doing. And I think to an extent, structuring is exactly that. You've got to work on how does this need to be, so that what I'm building, I'm not going to outgrow in terms of where I'm at.
Totally. And I think just have that conversation with your accountant. This is what I'm earning. This is what I'm looking to do. What are my options? And you'll probably find there's a few things you can tweak, if not get fully set up in a different entity, which makes a whole big difference.
100%. And there'll be some people that are possibly a little cynical or want to have a shotgun. Rich people do this and that. But, it goes for everybody. If you're in a position, for example, where you're a pay-as-you-go employee, it becomes a little bit more challenging. But nonetheless, things like negative gearing, if you're not using it, you should be, to try and get some tax benefit if you're a property investor. So the rules are there to be used, and structuring certainly is a great way to access them. So what I'm for getting yourself structured in the right way, because that you won't outgrow that structure.
Absolutely, thank God. Number 3 for you, AB.
Number 3 for me, I think, would be risk management. And learning about risk management. Everything always looks optimistic on the way in. You think, this is great, best thing ever. So glad I've learned about this. My first investment in the stock market should have been enough to put me off having a career in it. And I lost all my dough. I was only young. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And I went all in on something which proved to be, I didn't know any better, frankly. And that hurt. And I think sometimes when you have a setback, a setback is really a setup for the next level. I think it's John Maxwell, brilliant book, Falling Forwards. So whatever happens, even if it's a not good outcome, there are seeds of positives in there. So for me, realizing that you can lose all your money if you've got no idea what you're doing. Learn a bit more about it, and that's exactly what I did. I set about learning a little bit more about it, and my next investment was an absolute bell ringer. Paid for me to go to university. $5,000 into quite a decent chunk of coin. And that only came through from learning, how to identify risk. Didn't really then even know much about it. You think you do. It's like everything. The biggest risk of all is what you don't know. And you look back on that 30 odd years later and go, okay, again, there might have been a bit of good fortune in that particular investment. But risk management for me, because as I tell all of our clients at any opportunity, it's never what you make, it's what you get to keep. And we're in challenging times in the economy right now, and just focusing on upside is not the lens to look through. You've got to counterbalance it with okay, where's my risk in this? So that if things go catastrophically wrong, how does it leave me? If it goes a little bit wrong, how does it leave me? And if it runs perfectly, where am I at? And prepare for the worst, expect the best, and away you go.
So question to you on that. At the moment, you've got effectively what is an empire, raging business, houses, property, shares, all that kind of thing. how do you manage risk now that you've come that far along?
That's a very good question. Structuring for one, definitely structuring, because from tax efficiency and asset protection, those two things were pretty high up on my list with my accountant when we did my structuring. And don't forget, structuring will change over time when you get married and you have a family. All of those things can come in, but structuring from a risk mitigation point of view is huge. Secondly, I'm not a big fan of gearing. I have used it, but I don't like debt. My dad always used to say to me, as long as you owe someone money, you don't own yourself, which to an extent is true. That's probably cost me a lot in terms of I could have done and created a lot more wealth by being more geared. And I've got mates that just can't get enough gearing, and that's great. That's their beat to run to. But I think your perspective of risk and how you want to do it it's rather like music. Everyone's got their favorite genre and favorite song within that genre, and mine just happens to be that I don't like risk. I'm actually reasonably concerned. Some of my trades are aggressive. I appreciate that. They certainly were when I was younger, but I don't like risk, so I like to try and lay off. So with all of my trading decisions, I have a level of risk management in there, whether it be a stop loss or buying insurance or a particular outcome that I will take with the trade if it doesn't pan out in the way that I'd like. And we had some examples of that trading volatility earlier in this year, where there was a perfectly defined strategy to be able to trade out of a position and end up coming out of it quite nicely through a particular style of trading, I suppose, be the best way. In regards to property, making sure as a landlord that you have insurance is crucial. Not just in terms of the buildings and content, but landlord insurance too is an example of risk mitigation in the property space. And in life, just not doing dumb stuff. Because you can have a target on your back too. People think it's an easy mark because you got a bit of coin, let's go after you kind of thing. So just be smart and sensible in what you do. And I think a good example is that we've got a mutual friend, we'll leave names and details out, and I've known the guy for, I don't know, about maybe 13 or 14 years, and he's done a fantastic job of staying under the radar. He's just Mr. Anonymous, quietly going about his business. And we've got a client like that too.
I think I know who you're talking about here.
And you would not pick him from a bar of soap. And he's done a terrific job of staying under the radar. And that all blew up when he sold a property, quite a high-profile property for a decent chunk of coin. And all of a sudden, that advantage that he had, that money skill that he had by no one knowing anything about him, was gone because he's very much in the public space. And I think from a risk perspective, keeping under the radar a little bit and not being too showy and putting a target on yourself is probably a life example of that. It's very hard. I mean, we've got massive social media profile, and I'm the face of our business. So in that respect, I guess it's almost a bit of a sort of oxymoron that I'm talking about that. But I think just generally in life, not making a lot of noise and staying under the radar. It's not look at me. It's just go about your business. That's a great way of ensuring risk stays away from you.
I think it's a matter of, would you rather be rich or would you rather people know that you're rich? Yeah. You'd rather actually be it.
100%, and we've spoken to those sorts of things previously, and I think that's a big risk mitigator, hugely. Final one for you. What's your third?
Ooh. In all seriousness, I think the third one for me, one of the best moves I ever made was just getting started young with money. And look, I guess this probably ties back to goals and values, but when I was 18, 19, fresh out of uni and starting my journey here, most of my mates were traveling or partying and whatnot. And that's great because that's what they wanted. And fast forward 4 or 5 years later, they're in the same situation. I guess I probably took the other route where I wanted to hustle. And now I fast forward 4 or 5 years later, I've got the opportunity where I've had a massive head start financially, but I also can travel and I can do what I want because I did the hard yards early.
Absolutely.
So that I could reap the rewards now. And I would say to anyone who's young and who's genuinely serious about that is, if you truly want it, forget all the noise and just get it done, because once you get to the certain point over the hill, you can start to do it all and do it better. And
have it all effectively, yeah. It's interesting, and I mean, getting started young is key. I'm just thinking one of our clients, great guy, David Zohar, and I remember he brought his daughter, Rhoda, I think.
That's her, yeah.
Through through one of our face-to-face boot camps, sort of pre-pandemic.
Back in the day, yeah.
And I think she was 14 maybe at the time, and he was adamant that he wanted to give his kids a great education, great values, and you know, a lot of people going, oh, how can you bring your kids? And we encourage that. We want people to bring their kids through, because you know, this is about creating intergenerational wealth, and it's about giving them the lessons that maybe took you a few years in life to get at that earliest opportunity. And I couldn't agree with you more. The younger you get started, and it's not about being like a child prodigy, you know, Doogie Howser of finance or whatever it may be. Remember Doogie Howser? Is that wasted on you?
I think so.
Doogie Howser, MD. It was like
it
this kid that was a doctor. Terrible TV show and terrible example, but nonetheless, he and this isn't about being a child prodigy. It's just about getting your backside into gear through a level of clarity and making it happen. Yet we seem to sometimes fall foul of accepting all these roadblocks that aren't necessarily real. They're inherited or perceived. Oh, you can't do it yet, you're too young, or you should go and see the world first, or you know, have some fun and colour in your life before you settle down. All the sort of cliches and life rules that people usually that don't have anything throw around. And in reality, it isn't a mutually exclusive. You can have this, but that you can't have that. If you plan it out as you have, you know, you got a great trip coming up to the US. You can have a couple of 3 weeks over there in New York and having a great time, and it's richly deserved. But you've still got properties, still got a nice car, you've still got other investments that are working for you, and you've also got momentum that might be where the scorecard sits with what you have now, but that's where the scorecard sits today. It's growing because you have momentum. Whereas if you haven't got started, when I get back from my travels, I'll wait till I'm 25 and then I'll think about property, or once I get this amount saved up, they're all just markers that are just stallers, if you will, that stop you getting anything. And yeah, like I say, you can't get started early enough. And if you had your time over again, I was pretty keen when I got started, but I'd try and start even earlier than what I did.
Absolutely.
It'd be a shame sort of at that point in time you don't know what we know now, but I guess that's the beauty of having these kind of conversations that try and impart some level of wisdom if it comes across that way. It's not by any means supposed to be sanctimonious. It's designed to help people. Just get your finger out and get started. But we can often put these sort of barriers in place. When I've done this, or after that I'll start, or in the new year I'll get there, and then there's the next thing that comes up, and I've got this wedding to go to, so when I'm back, and just get on and get it done.
And it's not about being a millionaire at 25 or anything like that. It's just, if you're young and you can at least just start to educate yourself on what it means to invest and save and that kind of thing, it makes a huge difference.
It's vast, and the key thing, more than anything, if you go back to the sort of rules of wealth, is that the younger you get it done, you've got compounding working effectively for the rest of your life. And there's no, the secret to making decent money in life is compounding. The only way compounding works is to start. The only way you can start is to have some level of savings, which means you need to budget. And the only way you're going to budget is if you've got a goal to get somewhere at some stage later in life. And all the other ones are just waypoints. They're markers on the way through. And there's more specific skill sets. Is it property or shares? Or is it both? Where are you going to buy your property? Is it a multi-dwelling? Is it going to be something here? Is it going to be in a trust structure? Are you doing it yourself? Are you negative gearing it? What do you do if things go wrong? How have you packed out yourself to avoid an interest rate rise? Everything that goes around that. Are you appropriately insured? What's your risk management look like? They're all markers. You got to know what you want. You've got to be able to budget to save, so you have some money to work with. And ultimately around that, it's just getting started. And even if you get it wrong, just like I did with my first investment, it's a stutter step on the journey. It doesn't have to be the defining moment, oh, that didn't work, or give up. You just go, okay, why didn't it work? And that notion, I guess, of sort of doing a post-mortem, as we do on all our trades, what worked, what didn't, like we do on all our events, what worked, what didn't, is how you continually improve. And if you've got that game started and time is going to work for you, you're going to have a fantastic life. And that's what you deserve, because that's the reward for doing the right thing.
Absolutely. And you're a good example of that, AB. So for all of our listeners out there.
It's a mutual appreciation society very much. It's great. Let's just sit here and bask in the glory. Why
Absolutely.
Don't we?
But these are good lessons for all of our subscribers out there, for sure.
100%. No, it's great chatting. I mean, it's really informal, and it's nice for me to ask you some questions for a change. So
buttons down, sleeves rolled. This is good.
I like it. I might come up with a segue to put you on the spot, a really tragic segue for next week. I'll see what I can find.
Well, until such times, AB, thank you very much for your advice today. Great to chat.
Absolute pleasure. Anytime. There you have it, guys. Make sure you give us a review and a rating. And one more thing, if you know someone that would benefit from the content of today's podcast, make sure you share this link with them so that they can get access to it and start their journey.